I am so excited to introduce to you today Bill Bishop. Bill is an entrepreneur, author, speaker, and innovation coach. He's the creator of New Factory Thinking, a future-forward approach to innovation that helps companies create and launch big ideas and build the future of their dreams. More than 5,000 companies worldwide now use New Factory Thinking in their business. Bill worked as an IT communications contractor for companies including Apple, Bell Cellular, Kodak, and IBM. His job was to understand and communicate the future business potential of their technology to audiences. Based on this work, he started the Big Idea Company in 1987, the first company in North America to provide electronic publishing services. Bill wrote the first book on internet marketing in 1996, called Strategic Marketing for the Digital Age. He introduced the term digital marketing and foresaw the emergence of social media, smartphones, app stores, cryptocurrencies, video streaming, and AI machine learning. Today, Bill is here to share his advanced big idea future business strategies and how you can start thinking about your next big idea and moving into the future with confidence and creativity. And I am Luci Gabel, integrative leadership trainer, author, speaker, and your host on leadership, life, health, and happiness.
Thanks for having me, Luci. It's going to be hopefully a great conversation.
Such a pleasure, Bill. Thanks for coming on. I want to start off with this verbiage that you've been using, new factory versus old factory thinking. Could you explain that a little bit? I think our audience is really going to be interested in how they might think differently, but also, whether or not they're in this new or old way of thinking.
I have a company that's called the Big Idea Company. And I've been working with entrepreneurs mostly for the last 40 years. And I really have one objective that I'm trying to help them all do. Go from the level where they're at here to the level up here. And analogy I use is that most people are stuck in what I call the hot dog trap. It's like they're running a hot dog stand. They've got really good at it, but they're capable of being a gourmet chef, but they don't know how to get from being the guy running the hot dog stand to running this gourmet restaurant. So they've gotten stuck. So I call that the fast food gourmet barrier that they're caught up in. And I really have a passion for it because if someone's achieving their full potential, then we're all going to benefit, especially the person. So why do we get stuck? And primary reason we get stuck is not because of what the world's doing to us, but what's going on in our head, like what is our brain telling us? And so what I've developed is this very simple list of, I call them brain changers. It just helps you change your brain so you can get to that next level. And all of those together, I call new factory thinking. So there's this different way of thinking that's going to help you get to your new factory. So if you think of the old factory as the hot dog stand, then the new factory is the gourmet restaurant. Okay. So we have these brain changers. And the first one is very simple. It's just to say, we're going to keep our old factory. We're going to keep making hot dogs, whatever that looks like for you. And then we're going to start thinking about and working on our new factory. So we're going to have two things going on at once. We're going to have the old factory and the new factory. And we're going to spend only about 11% of our time on the new factory. So we're going to keep doing that hot dog thing. But if we spend 11% of our time, at least initially, on this, eventually we'll get to the situation where we're actually running the gourmet restaurant and we're the gourmet chef and we've got that kind of career or a kind of business. So that's, hopefully that analogy works for you.
That sounds great because I think everyone wants to be there. Everyone wants to move into that much bigger place where they can maybe even have to do less making of the hot dogs and being in the kitchen.
Exactly. So I have a number of times in my life that I got stuck in the hot dog trap. When I was in university, I was in journalism school. I got a job at night working in a restaurant. It was a steak restaurant. I won this lobster selling contest, and I wrote a whole book about that, but that's another story I can tell later. But anyway, so I was working in the restaurant, and then I graduated, but the money I was making working in this restaurant was pretty good. Like, it was more money than I would have made getting a job in working on a newspaper or something. So there I was, I graduated, and yet all I was doing was working in this restaurant, which wasn't nothing wrong with working in a restaurant, but at that point I wanted to get out of it, but I couldn't really figure out how to do that. And then I had this idea to start this magazine. So in that area where the restaurant was, I said, there's no like entertainment magazine. So I thought, okay, well, I'll work at the restaurant at night, and during the day, I'll work on this magazine. And so that's what I did. And with 6 months later, I published the first issue of it. And then over the next year, I kept working the restaurant. I got the magazine to be where I was making quite a bit of money. And then I quit the old factory, the restaurant, and now I had this publishing business. And that was really how I became an entrepreneur from that, right?
Right
So
away.
and it was interesting too, because I look back and I thought, oh, well, that was good. I just said, okay, I'm going to keep doing both. I didn't have to quit making the money at the restaurant at that time. I just said, let's work on this way out, something bigger and better for me to do. But, I went back to that restaurant 20 years later, and there were a couple of people there that I had worked with that were still working in the restaurant, which, once again, there's nothing wrong with working in a restaurant, but both of them were university educated, and I believe had a lot more potential than just that job. But they got stuck there because the money was pretty good. It wasn't bad. So they got stuck in the hot dog trap, and I was just kind of like, wow.
And you just explained how you create a business while still doing your
Old
hot dog,
factory. Right.
90% there
Yeah,
and 10% in the other
right.
place.
Because the thing is that people think, okay, if I'm going to get to that next level, somehow I need to change the old factory. Like, somehow reimagine the hot dog stand somehow, right? And make it, maybe I'll have more hot dog stands, or, sell more hot dogs. And then that is one way to go. And I couldn't say that would be the worst idea, but that usually doesn't work that well, because you're still thinking, well, I'm not really into hot dogs that much, right? What I really want to do is be a gourmet chef somehow. So it's about having those two things happening at once, and making that gradual transition into the gourmet world, whatever that is for you, right?
Very cool.
Yeah.
So you did this early on. This is how you figured it out, obviously.
Yeah.
And now you're helping people to do it. And I have watched a video that you have online with many, many case studies of people that have come from that hot dog stand and also moved into being the gourmet chef. And I wonder if you want to share one or two stories about that.
I mean, we've worked with over 5,000 people, and every one of them ultimately made that transition. And so that I have so many examples, but I'll give you one, which is pretty interesting. It's a fellow, and his name's Nick, and he said, I had a company in Australia. And when I met him, I said, what do you do, Nick? And he said, well, I cut grass. I started this business when I was in college, just with a lawnmower and a rake, and it turned into the biggest grass cutting company in Australia. So they had big contracts with all these cities, and I said, well, that sounds amazing. And he said, well, I've been doing it for 20 years or so, and it is good, but it's also, I kind of hit a wall. I said, I don't really know how to make it bigger. I don't want to make it bigger. I'm working all the time. And in spite of all the work and all the business we have, I'm not actually making that much money, because I'm mostly trading dollars with all my subcontractors and stuff like that. So he said, it's kind of reached the point where I need to figure out how to go beyond that, So we had one of our big idea conversations, and from that we came up with his big idea for his new factory. And when I told it to him, initially he didn't quite understand it, because he was still using the old way of thinking. Okay. He was still caught in this old way of thinking. So what we came up with by using these brain changers, so what he had was this software program he had. It was a logistics software program. It was the program that they used to figure out when to go out and cut the grass, basically. Okay. And when to tend the gardens and that sort of thing. It was a logistics thing. And it was kind of AI before AI. Anyway, so he had spent about $1 million developing that for his own company. I said, well, you know what you could do? You could give that away for free to all these cities. And he said, well, why would I do that? And then I explained it to him and went, oh, that's actually a good idea.
So why would he do that?
Yeah, exactly. So he went to these cities and he said, listen, I've got this software you can use to manage your projects, all the things you're doing in the city, and I'll give it to you for free. And they go, okay, well, free, I'll take it. So they spent quite a bit of time getting them all hooked up to this. And then they told him, they said, now that's level 1, the free level. But if you want to become a member of a higher level, then there's one that's $50,000 and then another one that's $250,000 a year.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, what do we get at those levels? And they said, well, that's when we start connecting this system to all your suppliers. So it's one integrated system. We called it integrated vegetation management system. That's what it was called. So he said, and we go to these contractors and we'll hook them up. They pay $10,000 a year to be part of this network. Okay. So almost every major city in Australia that had this free system said, yes, let's go to that next level. So they ended up with, I think, about 40 cities and at about 250 subcontractors that were on this system.
Nice.
And basically the system just ran itself once it was set up. Now, the interesting thing for him, one was, okay, one I gave away for free and I get now I did that. That was a brain changer. The second one though is, okay, who are some of these contractors? Well, they were his former competitors. Okay. So he's saying, wait a minute, I've turned my competitors into customers because I have this platform now. So anyway, so this worked really well. It was like 80% margin. Like if you took in $1,000, you'd keep $800 of it. Didn't have to give it to anybody else. The rest of it was the overhead. And this worked so well. And then the next shift that he made, which isn't mandatory, but in his case, he did it, was that he sold his old factory. He didn't want to cut grass anymore. When he sold it to these new owners, he said to them, listen, I have all these members, and I'm going to get more of them. If they need the grass cutting, then I will send them to you. But I just want 10% of whatever you're making on that contract ongoing. And they said, yeah, no problem. That'd be great. You're going to send us customers. That's fantastic. So he told me at a certain point, he says, I'm actually making more money now from my old factory than when I owned it, because every dollar that comes in, I just get to keep it. It's 10% right there. So now I don't have to worry about cutting grass and I just get this money. The other thing he said to me, he says that these brain changers really did change my brain because they get me to see opportunities that I never thought were there before. Right? I was very competitive. I just thought I should sell a product. He said one of the things that really shifted for him was, he said, when old factory thinking is, you do something like cut grass and then people give you money for it, because you've cut their grass. He says, well, now I get paid when grass gets cut. I'm just not the one that cuts it. Mm-hmm. He said, I just never would have thought of such a thing. Like that's even something that would even be right to do. So that had not even dawned on him. So he said, that's fantastic. And also he said, this is just a self-sustaining thing. I hardly have to do anything now. And where this system is at right now, of course, is that AI can be used to run this system and to really help optimize, all the activity that's going on in Australia around cutting grass and making sure that we're using the minimal amount of energy and it's taking care of the environment and so on. So he's really set himself up for the future. So anyway, that's an example of having the old factory where you're cutting grass and saying, okay, well, what would the new factory be? And as I said, most people would say, well, we need to get more customers to cut more grass. That would be how we would scale our business, right? Well, that's one way of doing it. The other way is to think completely differently about it. And in this case, create this network platform that is doing the whole thing in a completely different fashion. So it's like he had a taxi company and he invented Uber, essentially. Mm-hmm. So this is why this new factory thinking can completely change how you see how a business might run.
That's definitely a brain shift. And I
Okay.
remember you also talking about nostalgia, what happened in the past,
Mhm.
and how we tend to be in, I guess, this mental rut of, okay, this is how things go, this is how they have always been, and then needing to shift out of that. And that's actually pretty hard. So, do you have experience working with people on that? I mean, how does that go when you work with people
Yeah,
on?
yeah. Well, in technical terms, they call it the, I guess, psychological terms, they call it the status quo bias.
Mm,
So what that means is that as human beings, even though we can see the world changed a lot in the past, like, think about the last 30 years or something, right? But when we think forward, it's hard for us to imagine how it would be much different. Maybe we just say, oh, yeah, I'll have an iPhone 25 and it'll be faster or something. But we don't really think that things will change like completely. It's very hard for us to imagine that. So we just tend to keep going with whatever the status quo is. It's because it's safe, and it's hard to imagine that anything being different. My publishing business, we got Kodak as a client. We published a number of magazines for them, and so I knew the company pretty well. I knew the president of the company. I played tennis with him a few times, and in 1995, my photographer I worked with, John Nervali, he got one of the first digital cameras. It was a professional digital camera. It was the size of a bread box, and it was $15,000 in those days. Like, think of it, like 30,000 now or something. But it was good investment, right? Because we could see that it could do a lot. So I said, well, let's go show it to the president of Kodak and see what he thinks. And I thought he would be all excited, right? Yeah. So what do you think? What do you think his reaction was?
based on the conversation, I think he probably thought it was a silly idea.
Yeah, yeah. So, he was totally against it. It was like crazy. He said, "Well, nobody's going to want this. It's this huge thing. It's $15,000. Who's going to carry that around?" And and the quality's not that hot. Film is so much better. And I thought, okay, well, it's going to get smaller. It's going to get cheaper, and the quality's going to get better. That's just sort of obvious. This is just version one. I said, anyway, no, no, no one will ever want it. And I'm like, wow, that's crazy, because it's a super smart guy, right? So anyway, so we know what happened. I mean, they actually did try to get into digital photography a bit, but their heart wasn't in it, and because they really saw themselves as a chemical company. They'd been doing it for over 100 years. That was how they made their money. There was a huge amount of resistance to the idea of digital photography. I mean, they were actually trying to like somehow slow it down or whatever, kind of like trying to stop the tides from coming in or something. So they were totally in the status quo trap. And for me on the outside, it was so obvious to see it. But then I could see why they were resisting it, because it was scary for them. And it was going to completely put them out of business. But looking back on what I know now, I wasn't in a position to advise them about this and that then, but well, if they had done is say, okay, well, we're just going to keep making film, but we're going to take 11% of our time and resources and create this division called Kodak Digital. And we're just going to leave them alone, and we're going to let them do whatever they're going to do, and see what they can come up with. I think if they had done that, they would probably be a $1 trillion business right now, and we'd all be watching Kodak streaming video and using a Kodak smartphone, and they would have had been able to do it because they were the big company at the time. They had all the resources to do it. They would have created the YouTube of the time, probably a Kodak tube or something, but didn't do it because we're a film company, right?
And I also think it's really powerful to say we're just going to allot a little bit of resources to this new idea because it doesn't feel like such a big risk.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So that's the thing I'm telling you. Don't have to change anything. People don't like change, but we're going to add something, and people don't mind getting something more, adding something, right? Saying, oh, I get something new. That's a little easier for everyone to kind of get their head around, because innovation is not just something we talk about. It's got to be something we do, and it has to be something that takes into account our status quo bias and our resistance to change and that kind of thing. So we need just a simple little brain changer, and that's the one. And and really, I've seen people just go, that totally frees me up to do this. Like, now I look back, it's kind of simple, but But if you don't think of it, you don't do it.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And
So,
you say simple brain changer.
yeah.
But really, we just talked about being stuck as well. I mean, how is there any maybe one thing you could share with people? How do you get out of that way of thinking that you've already and always been thinking? Because it requires creativity, it requires being outside the box. There's a lot of process that goes into it, I think. It's not just like, don't think the same way, you know?
Yeah. Well, once again, it has to be something simple, right?
Mm.
So in 1990, let's see, 1998, I had that publishing business, and it was starting to get into a little gnarly because of everything digital and everything, and it was becoming a very kind of competitive industry and stuff. And I had like 30 people working for me, and I was just like the grass guy. It was like at a certain point, I was like, I got so many things to deal with, and I'm not making as much money as I wanted to be, and I was just became a I went from being an entrepreneur to being a manager, right? So it was kind of I was at a point, you know. Anyway, so I had the idea, okay, you're gonna have my new factory. And the simple thing I did was I just got out of the old factory and went across the street to the Starbucks across the street. And
Hmm.
I always have one of these. This is my new factory book here. And I took that little book. I didn't want to be on a computer or anything. I just wanted to have really low key thing. But I went across the Starbucks and just sat there. So what would be the ideal business for the future, right? So I'm just going to spend time here. I got, spend an hour, just right now, just an hour, sit here. Even if I just stare at the walls, what would be a better business for me? And so I had a couple of insights that were helpful because I did that. I just went across the street, got out of the environment, right? Totally. I wouldn't have thought this up if I'd just been in the old factory. So I got out of there. I want to take everything to a higher level. So that's another brain changer, is to say, you want to assume a higher position in the marketplace, something at a higher level, right? Like that's what the gourmet idea. And I thought, okay, well, we're kind of like marketing plumbers, but what people really need is a marketing architect. They need somebody to look at the whole picture. We're not trying to sell you pipes or, whatever, a website or something. I just want to look at the whole thing. And then the other thing I said to myself, well, what's the most important and valuable thing that I can do? And the rest of us, but me personally, that I can do that's sort of my ultimate kind of ability. And I thought, well, it's coming up with big ideas, like thinking of ideas for businesses and stuff. I said, so let's create a business where, like the marketing architect, where we help people come up with big ideas for the future. And that's a couple of times at Starbucks, it all took to think of that. And I said, well, then what if I had a process to do that and a program and all and so on? So at that point, I was at the beginning of something big because I created the Big Idea Adventure Program. And as of today, we've had 5,649 members in that program. The sales from that program are around 50 million for that business. And then what happened was that 5 years later, I did the same thing as the other guy. I sold my old factory, and I was totally out of that. But I said, look, if anytime I got some business for you, I'll just send them to you. Just give me 10% of that. So, and then I have other companies like that I deal with, but in the same fashion. But I got out of the old factory and moved into the new factory just by going across the street and taking that time to think about it, So that's actually another simple bit of advice. Like, get out of the old factory, go somewhere else.
Hmm.
And somewhere you can go kind of regularly too, not just like go for a retreat or something and have a big
Yes.
weekend and have, I think those are useful too. But I think it's just this thing where I'll just go to Starbucks or just another room in my house, or even just another room in your office, even, I guess. But somewhere else that, you're not caught up inside the machinery of the old factory.
But I do want to say, you may have heard that there's scientific research, psychological research, stating that when we just shift our environment, go somewhere else besides the place that we've been thinking the same things over and over, or we got stuck, it actually does help our brain to shift. So I always talk to my clients about go outside for a walk, or just take the car and sit at a nice view where your brain can relax. And that's when we start getting all the creative momentum, because a
Right.
relaxed brain also really helps.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a really good advice, and it definitely worked. It worked for me. I came up with my big idea. I don't think I would have done it if I'd been stuck in the office. And then the other thing too these days, I think, is to think, how can I create a new kind of business using the technology that exists now? Like, what would that be, right?
Yeah, so cool.
Yeah, well, that's another brain changer, is to say, well, what can we do with this new technology? I remember one time I was giving a workshop, and it was hosted by this guy who owned a taxi company. And in the middle of my talk, I just mentioned Uber in some context, and he went
Oh,
like ballistic. He was like he got up and started ranting about Uber. And I thought, yeah, no, I can see why you'd be mad about Uber. But then I realized there's actually an even bigger reason he's mad. He wouldn't have admitted it, but the biggest reason he was mad was because he didn't think of it himself. Because when Uber came along, at that point, it was worth like $50 billion, and his business is worth half as much as it was at that point. And then the question begs the question: why didn't he think of Uber? I mean, he was in the taxi business, right? And he had access to all the same technology and everything. Why didn't he think of it? Well, he didn't think of it because, one, he didn't spend the time to think of it. He didn't go across the street. But the second thing was that he was so caught up in, well, what's a taxi business mean? Well, it's taxis. Like, there's actual taxis, and that's how a taxi works. And a taxi company owns taxis. And I guess he didn't really think about what smartphones and apps might do to that industry. So, of course, he didn't think of it. So new technology can give you new ways of doing things. And that's when you've really got to say, I might even think of something that might put us out of business, right? Um,
put yourself out of business.
yeah, probably like why Blockbuster didn't want to get into streaming. Netflix offered them the business twice, and Blockbuster said no because they
They need
probably
to do
thought,
that 11% thing.
well, in that case, they were like, well, wait a minute, then people wouldn't need any. We have all these stores and all these videos and stuff like that. Nobody will need them anymore. We have
Mhm.
streaming. But that was kind of weird because it was like, well, yeah, but eventually someone will do it, and then they won't need you anyway. So you might as well be the one that owns this new way of doing it. But that was another kind of Kodak thing. They were just like, there's no way. Like, and it was also like, well, there's no business there. I don't see any buildings or people or stuff like that. How can that be a business?
Yeah, that's what we would think back then.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So,
It's it's not tangible.
right, right.
What's next?
Yeah.
So, this sounds like hard stuff. I mean, for people to do on their own. Yes, there is that creative momentum that we talked about.
Mhm.
So, I know that you actually help people to do this, don't you?
Yeah, yeah, that's what our process is about. Now, just when you say it's hard, it's all relative though. Like, if you think about it, what's harder, to create this new thing and be a gourmet chef, or is it harder to, for the next 20 years, to continue trying to make money selling hot dogs? What's actually harder? So when you start to get in touch with that and think, oh yeah, I don't that would be bad, because I never really set out to just run a hot dog stand. I actually had a lot more ideas than that. That would be really hard, right?
Yeah.
So it's you need a little bit of activation energy to get yourself going, and then to say, well, if I had a big idea that got me excited, I think I would spend that 11% of my time on it. So what I do, if you want to know,
Yes.
is I have a session I do. It's called the Big Idea Outfitter. So the ideas that I mentioned there, they all got created in that session. It's just a free session I do with anyone that's willing, and 60 minutes. And I just take you through the new factory thinking process. And it's kind of amazing because a lot of people come in and say, well, there's no way I'm going to get a big idea. Like, I don't have one. I said, no, no, everybody's got one somewhere in there. And it always comes out, right? And
Awesome.
then they're kind of amazed that I actually was able to draw it out of them. And then of course, at that point, I say, well, then, this is the thing. You're running your hot dog stand. We're going to keep doing that. But do you want to work on getting out of that? Like, this is, it's not going to actually be that hard. It's just one small step at a time. And a lot of people have said, yeah, I want to make that happen. So That's how that works. And if I could, just so we can maybe make it easy for people, put a QR code up there.
The links in the description. Yeah.
So if anyone wants to do that, I'd love to
Yeah.
talk to you.
I would highly recommend you get in touch with Bill for that wonderful complimentary session. You actually worked for Apple way back in the day, right? On the note of marketing and such. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I probably wouldn't be here at all if I hadn't done that. So when I was working at the restaurant and working on the magazine, an Apple store opened near where I lived. It was the first one in Toronto, and it was like 1986 or something. And I just went there, and I had that computer there, right there, and I started playing with it. And then they couldn't kick me out of the store, right? Like I didn't have the money at that point to buy it. But I just kept hanging out there. And finally they said, okay, listen, if someone comes over, just show them how it works. I said, okay, fine, I'll do that. And then I ended up selling a bunch of them to people, right? So they said, okay, so you're actually really good at getting people to buy these things. And that evolved into me basically being the spokesperson for Apple in Canada. So I was going to conferences and trade shows and getting up on stage and explaining the computer and all that. So I guess that was my journalism background that helped me with that. And anyway, so that really helped me get my head around technology and talking about the business potential of it. And so I worked with like Bell, and I worked with Kodak, and I worked with a number of other companies, that IBM, to help them with the same thing. So that was when I got into all the technology side of things as well, which is why I talk about technology as well as big ideas, right? That it's a catalyst for that.
Great example of going with the bliss,
Mm-hmm.
doing what you love.
Yeah, I was annoying. Anyway, they ultimately gave me that computer, and I used that computer to start the publishing business. You see, so one thing kind of led to the other, and that's what I've always done. Like I just think, well, what's interesting to me today, and I just explore that, and I just keep going. And every once in a while, I'm going, well, nothing interests me right now, so I go into a little bit of a fallow thing. But then something gets my attention. I go, oh, that's really interesting, and then I just keep pursuing that until the next thing comes along. So it's not really a shiny object, but maybe it is. I don't know. I'm actually kind of a believer in shiny objects. Actually, people downplay those, but I think they're actually pretty good.
Important for motivation, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Just to keep yourself interested in the world.
Yes, keep interested. So important to keep your brain active as well,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
be
Exactly.
interested.
Yeah.
What's the story you wanted to share?
Well, it's kind of the answers to the question. People say, well, how did you get that whole business started? Like, where did this all really begin, right? And it even goes back before the computer. When I was working at that restaurant, and they had the contest. They had this lobster contest to sell lobsters, and then I won the contest. I sold 1,400 lobsters altogether, and the second waiter sold 90
Whoa, over how many
3
days?
months. It was over 3 months.
Wow.
So initially I was not doing very well. When people would order a steak, I'd say, hey, you want to have a lobster with it? And they go, no, I don't want that. No way, go away. So it wasn't working. I think after like 3 weeks, I'd sold 4 of them or something. And then I said, well, maybe I should just change up the game here a little bit, try something else. So I said something differently to the customers, and I started selling lobsters like crazy. All the waiters and the management really wanted to know. And I said, look, I'm not going to tell you because it's a contest, right? So no way I'm going to let my secret out. Anyway, so what I did was I went up to the table. The first one I did it with was a it was an office party. There was like 20 people there. And I said to them, I said, look, you've got a choice here. You can have the basic steak, or you can have our special. And they said, what's the special? I said, well, it's a steak and lobster. So what do you want to have? You want to have the basic, or do you want to have the special?
What?
And 20 people ordered the special.
That's
Oh my
great.
God, I just sold 20 lobsters. All of a sudden I'm in first place now. So I just kept doing that, and it worked really well. And I started thinking, well, why does it work? And then, so I learned 3 things that I've really worked for me and for all these years later, and also taught so many of my clients to do. So first thing is I just gave them a choice of two things. So therefore, okay, which one do you want, kind of thing. But the choice was interesting because it wasn't about the lobster, it was about them. If they order the basics, what kind of person are they now? They're a basic person. If they order the special, they're a special person. So when we're doing marketing and everything, we got to be thinking about what kind of person am I giving them a choice? You can be a basic person or you can be a special person, depending on what you want. I want to be a special person. Okay. And then
we all want to be special. Yes.
The second thing was it added value to whatever they were doing, because in this case, the office party, because they're either going to have a basic office party, which is like, boring party, or going to have a special office party, exciting party. Okay. I love working at this company, right? So that led to the third thing that I figured out was, okay, you want to create value in the marketplace. You could try to make a better lobster, but actually people don't buy things, they buy ideas. So all you have to do is create a better idea. So by using the word special and giving them the choice, I created a whole different ideas about this product in their mind, which is, ultimately the foundation of any marketing, right? But it was to see that so vividly was, okay, I'm really just changed the idea. I didn't change the price and change the product, and now everybody wants to buy it. So how does value get created? It's all about creating a better idea. And so that's why I ultimately called my company the Big Idea Company. Because I say to people, look, you don't have to change everything. You got your old factory, it's fine. What if we just create a better idea? You're probably going to sell a lot more of whatever it is you're selling. That's all we have to do, right? So that's why when I do that big idea session, it's like, okay, this is actually not that hard because I'm not telling you to change anything except the idea, which is easier to change than your whole factory and your product and everything. Just what's the idea people are getting about that thing? And that's way easier to do.
That's a great final point. I love it. And also, I want to just throw it out there. This was your first book, right? The Lobster, How to Sell.
Well, it wasn't my first book, but it's my most popular book. If I point my finger in there, right there. Yeah. That book's called How to Sell Lobster. It's been published in 25 countries, translated into 12 languages. So it's a very small little book, but it talks about that story and a number of other ones that are just as, I think, interesting. But people, they just go crazy because they read it and they go, well, that's so simple but powerful, but I never would have thought of it. But now that I have, it's like it changes everything.
How many books do you have up there that you wrote? How many books are there?
Well, I've written 11 books altogether so far. And I've got the next one. I'm trying to figure out which. I've got like 3 different possibilities. So I'm just trying to. I write a book every couple of years.
Well, I'm hoping that some of the people listening here will be starting to follow you. All the links will be in the description. I am so grateful for your time today, Bill. Thanks for sharing all that you did here with the audience.
Yeah, well, thank you, Lucy. It's always a pleasure to talk to you and share my message.
If you like this episode, click like, subscribe if you want more like this, and make sure to share it with someone who could use it right now. This is Luci Gabel. I'll talk to you next time.